Hey everybody, welcome back to CALLOUS Draft League Finals. Cutting it a little bit tight on time here, as you can see in the bottom right corner, almost 9 a.m. for me. Do have to get to work, but we make sacrifices for the team, and I hope that you guys have been enjoying this tournament. It's the finals, so hopefully this is exciting for you. You already know, it's the purple versus green team. We've got purple this time on the left kicking off and green on the right. We've done all the individual drafts. Now it's time to cover the team drafts. So, representing purple in this one, we've got JoeFish, team captain Kingu, and Blues. And Blues being the standout here because he might very well be the best player overall on the purple team, and generally speaking, with him being the one weird exception, and who knows, maybe he asked to get placed there, I don't know. But generally speaking, teams have opted to put all their best players in the individual draft rather than in the team draft, so they don't get BS'd out in a best of one, so they can play a best of three and have a better chance of the superior player winning. So that's interesting. On the right-hand side, for the green team, we've got Salmon, Steve, and Dastardly Dwarf. And I've got to point something out, because he would never, he's such a nice guy, he's not trying to make excuses or bring attention to himself, but I got to tell you, for someone who is not one of the top one or two players on their team, and who is always facing the best players on the other team because he's always high in the lineup, I would say that Dastardly Dwarf has had probably the toughest schedule of anybody in this tournament. He has, for whatever reason, just dumb coincidence, had to play against the top players on the other team over and over and over again, just by dumb luck of how the pairings fell. And this is another one of those. He's against Blues here, which is a brutal pairing. But like I said, it's best of one, so anything can happen. Doesn't take a miracle to win. But yeah, with that said, why don't we bang out a quickie before work? Oh, sorry, I was reading a text message that I received from Jabba's mother. My bad. I meant, let's begin the draft. So Kingu with the first pick. Metagross. Blues, T-Tar. We got some original strategies in this draft. I've never seen anything like this before. Here's the counter for the green team. It's going to be Celebi into currently unknown opponent, Skarm into Metagross, and then Starmie into T-Tar. I believe we've seen this exact same response before as well. The benefit that I always point out is when you take Skarm and Starmie at the same time, there are far fewer good rapid spinners that could be on the other side. And Starmie honestly might be the worst one for Skarm's perspective. I mean, if you go Claydol, like, yeah, it could sit there and refresh on you, but like it doesn't actually hurt you. 4 beats Skarm on paper, but you might load it into a whole team of fire attacks. So I think taking Starmie is a good call. I do always like this opening. The question always becomes, what do you take on the wheel if you are in the 1A seat? Very commonly, we've seen Snorlax and Salamence, but I think I like this wheel better, personally. He's going to go instead with still Snorlax, but rather than Mence, he's going to opt for Gengar here. And yeah, Gengar might be worse against Celebi, like a little bit, but it's got some play. And you've got the double boom synergy here, you've got great type synergy here, and then I think Gengar is just better than Salamence, and harder to counter, personally. Not everyone feels that way, I feel that way. We'll see if this ends up being a wise decision, but I can get on board with the Gengar over what has been a Salamence pick in this spot. And now that this part is pretty much memorized, because this opening has happened a couple times, minus, I guess, the Gengar, now it starts to get interesting and we start to see some deviations. So let's work our way back through green, and we will get the following picks. We're going full-on airborne as we take Salamence, Zapdos, and Aerodactyl, respectively. So the Salamence is into the T-Tar, which that matchup goes both ways. You can Brick Break it, DD Earthquake it, whatever the case may be. It can also T-Wave you, Ice Beam you, Rock Slide you, whatever. So they both threaten each other, but Mence, I think, overall is a fine pick into T-Tar. Zapdos into Meta is a pick that I would really want anyway, maybe even more so than the Skarm, so the fact that he's allowed that to come back. And maybe that's an argument for JoeFish that he's actually supposed to take, like, Lax Zap or Zap Gar or something like that, but I'm fine with his picks. But it does allow this, and I think Zapdos into meta is where you want to be. The Aerodactyl's the pick that I'm least sure about, and it's certainly not a bad pick by any means. I wonder if there's an argument here to take Blissey or something to that effect, but or maybe even a Bulky Water. Not that it's fantastic against these, but I kind of I don't hate the arrow. Fine against Gengar, fine against Snorlax. It's not really about the arrow for me as much as it's about what are you passing back, because now you have Blues and Kingu here can go double Bulky Water, they can go double Special Wall. They've got a couple of good options here, and it's interesting for Blues and Kingu to consider taking double Bulky Water because they themselves, as the Metagross and T-Tar drafters, don't necessarily want to play against it. But the other weird dynamic, though, is that on their team, the player that needs the Bulky Water the most, arguably, is actually JoeFish, who doesn't have a pick right now, playing against the Aerodactyl, though you obviously do want a Bulky Water against the Ments as well. So probably if I were in their shoes, I'd go like Milotic for Blues into the Salamence, and then honestly, I might very well consider Blissey if I'm Kingu, but they are going to do it differently. So they're going to go with Regice, which, I mean, Bolt Beam obviously makes sense into Starmie Salamence, and then they're going to take Blissey in this middle seat, which is fine. So it's interesting that they pass back the double Bulky Water, though. That's my one hesitation, and I wouldn't be surprised if they immediately get snatched up. That's my one fear with doing it this way if I were rooting for purple. And that is what's going to happen here, unsurprisingly. They're going to go with Swampert in the middle, and then Milotic to Salmon here. Which, like I said, you kind of, by passing there, you kind of run the risk. There's a high chance that was going to happen. So, I mean, that's a big advantage for green. That kind of porks blue in a couple places, but I think JoeFish is the one who gets porked the most here. I don't know if down the road he now starts looking at Vaporeon or... I mean, the problem is multiple players on purple need Bulky Waters now, and there's just not enough good ones to go around. That's why I think on the previous picks over the Regice Blissey, I think I would have taken at least one of the Bulky Waters and gotten that out of the way. If Blues were to have taken Milotic, I think, over the Regice there, and I seldom advocate against a Regice pick, but I think I would have gone Milo there because not only does it cover all things that the Ments could be, but I also think it has better synergy with the T-Tyre. I think Regice a little bit gets a bit worse in sand, loses a bit of its bulk. So, just a nitpick, but when we're at this level, when we're in the finals, really, truly, every little thing, all the small things, they really do matter. So, you're allowed to nitpick here because it all adds up in the end. So, purple is actually going to completely decline to take anything resembling a Bulky Water here, which I kind of don't blame them because the options after this double pick are kind of limited. So, I really thought those were huge picks for green and a noteworthy turning point in the draft that we can come back to if I end up feeling like green has the advantage. But for now, it's going to be Jolteon, and then Moltres, and also Fori. Alright, so starting with the Jolteon, we can obviously see the merit here against Starmie and Salamence, can threaten both with T-Bolt and HP Ice respectively, so I see where he's going with it. Of note, and it's very early, so no need to hit the panic button, but he does pick up a second EQ weakness when he currently has no resistance or immunity, so he's going to have to address that down the road. Moltres into Swampert Scar makes sense. Obviously, it's not fantastic into Zapdos, but it's still a sensible pick in the matchup. And Fori is interesting as well. Not typically a Mon that I think has incredible synergy team-building-wise with Lax. Obviously, it's good with Gar. But he does pick up a third Boom user if he wants to go with an aggressive Spikes Boom team, which I think is a super viable archetype. He's going to pick up a Spiker into an opponent who doesn't have a Spinner. And the Fori, again, pending random HP fires, matches up reasonably well against everything on the other side. It should beat Celebi one-on-one other than HP fire, and it should be able to sit on Milotic pretty safely, get some spikes down, and it can even tank an Aerodactyl hit or two, and maybe, just maybe, threaten to counter back, which very well may kill the Aerodactyl. So I don't mind the Fori pick there. Maybe a little bit early, because I think Fori is more vulnerable in this format than it is otherwise, but I can't think of anything of like, oh man, are you sure you want to pass that? I can't think of anything that I feel like he needs to take there in place of the 4E. So with that in mind, picking a direction and building a team around it is a fine thing to do this early. So right now we're looking at probably some kind of aggressive spikes team with triple boom user, which I think very well could work. So going over to Dastardly Dwarf now with the double pick. A powerful double pick indeed. Double rock resist, unsurprising given that he's playing against the T-Tar on the other side. He's going to go with Hariyama and Registeel. And not only, I mean, Hariyama's money, right? So not only is it a rock resist, but also fighting is obviously a good attacking type against T-Tar and Regice as well. I wonder if Blues is going to take Wheezing down the line, because he needs to address both the double EQ and the double fighting weakness, and Wheezing, obviously, perfect Mon, would deal with both. And it would also deprive the A-seat opponent from grabbing that, because obviously you don't want to let Wheezing go into lack. So I think Wheezing is an interesting down-the-road pick for Blues. The Registeel is good as well. That is a special wall that he currently needs. It can wall the Jolteon and the Regice, frankly, all day. I guess the Regice has like a tiny asterisk because you could freeze it, but other than that, it walls you forever. And then it's reasonably good against T-Tar as well. Special Tar maybe can get him, Fire Blast or whatever, maybe. Don't even know if that does enough damage. But even if you were to run Special Tar, Hariyama would shut that down pretty effectively. So I think these are great picks for Dastardly Dwarf. Maybe the exactly right picks. It's going to give him padding against everything on the other side, double padding against the ever-dangerous T-Tar, and give him a much-needed special wall and a half. So exactly what he needs for the matchup. Great picks, in my opinion. And we swing back over to the purple team now for another triple pick. And boy, are these are some picks. We're going to go with Houndoom, not what I expected. Claydol, and that Wheezing that we just discussed, which it makes perfect sense given where we are in the draft. But the one that really stands out to me is the Houndoom. That's got to at least have some defensive element, because who would be excited to take Houndoom into Aerodactyl and Milotic? Doesn't seem fantastic as an attacker. Granted, it is reasonably good against Celebi, but it's not perfect in that matchup either. But against Aero Milo, it is not great. So there's got to be a defensive element there where he's attempting to protect his Gengar. We'll see what he takes down the road from here, but I think it is very possible that he doesn't actually end up bringing the Houndoom and was just doing that as a defensive pick. And I'm okay with that. I think defensive drafting is really, really important in this. If he's happy with his core 3 and he feels like there's a Mon that could really give him a hard time and ruin his day, I think it's okay to spend a mid-pick to get rid of it and then just fill in the team accordingly. So, like I said, I don't actually know that he's going to play the Houndoom, but even if he doesn't, I don't hate this pick. I could see why he would do that. Claydol into Skarm, fair enough. I mean, you never had a shot at Starmie. It got taken immediately. You're going to need some kind of spinner, so I guess it's going to be Claydol. Not that it's fantastic, just that it's probably the lesser evil. The problem that I always have from the Claydol seat, even if you are Refresh Doll or Rest Doll paired with Aromatherapy or whatever, which he does have access to already, the problem is you don't do any meaningful damage to the Skarm. And in fact, a lot of the time, after you've already chipped the Skarm, you got a Seismic Toss or two on it with Blissey, or it ate a Meteor Mash with Gross, or whatever. A lot of the time, Skarm will just sit there and lefties up on the Claydol. So while you're sitting there, clicking Rapid Spin and Refresh every other turn, Skarm's just nursing itself with lefties back up to 100%. That's my fundamental issue. I'm not saying that Claydol blows or that he doesn't need a spinner, because both of those things are not true. But I just don't think that Claydol is as good of a Skarm answer as people seem to think that it is. Nevertheless, like I said, spinner necessary, good options already depleting. Gotta do what you gotta do. Claydol is probably the best option given what's available. And the Wheezing pick instantly came to my mind, given the team and given what's on the other side. Has a double fighting weakness, has a double ground weakness. Wheezing immediately comes to mind as something that addresses both, so that was the right pick. And that's what this format is about. Is Wheezing on its own, on paper, the best Pokemon remaining? with things like Gyarados, Dragonite, Raikou, Heracross, Medicham, with that stuff still floating, is Weezing the best Pokemon? I don't know. You could make an argument that it's not. But it's not about that. That's why tier lists in this only go so far. It isn't really about what would be best on its own or at the beginning of the draft or anything like that. It's what's best in your situation, what's best based on what already happened. And the answer, clearly, in my opinion, is that Weezing is point blank the best pick that he can make here. The pick that he has to make here. That's the exact Mon that he has to take to address the current situation. So good for Blues for making what I think is absolutely unequivocally the right pick. Any other pick would be worse and would be wrong. Weezing is the guy in this situation. So we move it back over to Green. They'll have 2 picks, and then we shall move along. Green is going to finish out this round with Raikou for Salmon and Heracross for Steve. Let's take a closer look at those. So the Raikou is going to be picked into Lax, which is little unsure about that particular pick, but I guess we'll see. And then, I mean, it isn't bad into the rest of the stuff. It's good against Gar. It's okay against Fori. Raikou into Lax and what we know is going to be a Sandless game is what makes me a little bit nervous, but we'll see. I could take or leave that pick. Raikou's fine. It's not amazing. It's not terrible. It's a good Mon. It's a playable Mon. It's more to me about the Lax on the other side. Don't know that Raikou really breaks through that, so it makes me a little bit hesitant on that pick. The Heracross in the middle for Steve, however, makes more sense to me. It doesn't like Moltres, but Moltres has to be very careful. Switching in would be insta-deleted by a Rock Slide, and then obviously the Megahorn and Fighting combo threat against Meta Blissey Claydol is very real, so that pick makes a ton of sense for that matchup. We swing it back over to the purple team. Kingu and Blues are going to have a double pick here, and this is what they'll do. Going to go with Gyarados, a Pokemon that you guys know that I am very fond of. And then Blues, like I said, must add a bulky water at some point. I'm kind of surprised that he opts for Slowbro over Vaporeon. Probably not the pick that I would have made. I think I prefer Vaporeon there, but he definitely, one way or another, needed a bulky water. And it could be part of the consideration is that taking the Slowbro gives him another fighting resistance, specifically against the Hariyama, and I do think that that is sound logic. Also, Slowbro gets a couple of moves that could be relevant here that Vaporeon does not, though they both do have Ice Beam for purposes of dealing with the Salamence. As far as the Gyarados in the middle matchup, same thing. Same thing as with the Raikou. Awkward to pick Gyarados into Zapdos, picking him on into one of its hardest counters, but I think that that pick was simply to deal with the Heracross, to have the Intimidator, to have the Fighter check, but this is probably going to be the world's most defensive Gyarados. This is probably going to be a very bulky, maybe even a Rest Gyara paired with Bell/Aroma Bliss, because you just picked Gyarados into not only Zapdos, but Skarmory Zapdos. So offensively, that thing is going to do nothing. It's going to get shut off all effing day. Skarmory, Zapdos, Swampert, are you kidding me? Gyarados is going nowhere offensively. So, if he's taking that, it must be as a Heracross check. And like I said, I would expect it to be built very defensively and very well might have Protect or Rest or both. And just its one role in the matchup is to check the Heracross and to a lesser extent the Swampert indefinitely. Not an offensive threat whatsoever. Switching it back over to the green team with their triple pick. They're going to get pretty good value for where we are in the draft. These are powerful Pokemon still available. It's going to be Medicham, who you guys know I love. Dragonite, who you guys know I love. And Umbreon I wouldn't say that I love, but an underrated poke that I think I like better than most people do. Alright, Medicham into that A-Seat matchup. I like that a lot better than Raikou. That is a big threat to all of this team. Lax and Houndoom, don't know if he's going to bring the Houndoom, but they're both weak to fighting. Gengar, obviously, insta-deleted by a Medicham Shadow Ball, and then I don't think Medicham can one-hit KO Fori, maybe Focus Punch, maybe a crit, whatever. But other than getting boomed on, Medicham is not threatened by the Fori, and it can sit there and sub up and attack or whatever it is that it wants to do. It seems like a big threat against the whole lineup for JoeFish. A perfect time to grab a Medicham. It's great in the matchup. You guys know that I love Dragonite. I can do the same bullshit all day. I can customize a set for you on the spot. Alright, we've got Thunderbolt against Moltres and Gyarados. We've got Earthquake for Meta. We've got Focus Punch for Blissey. And we've got Ice Beam for Doll. There you go. This Dragonite covers everything. It's so easy to do. It's such a customizable mon. Anything you want it to do, it can do. Love me some Dragonite. Will never say no to that pick. Umbreon into this matchup. That one's probably the biggest head scratcher for me. I'm not clear why he thinks he needs that. It's another special wall against a team that's like really, really special heavy. All of Regice, Jolteon, and Slowbro are probably strictly special. Slowbro, I put a minor asterisk. It does learn Focus Punch, Shadow Ball, Earthquake. It can go the physical route, but it's not good at it. I don't know why he feels that he needs the Umbreon. I don't hate the pick by any means. It's just I feel like he's already reasonably padded against special threats, but maybe he wants to be more padded against special threats. Maybe it's as simple as that. Maybe he just wants to overload in that way and be very, very safe. A problem that I'm seeing emerging for Dastardly Dwarf, and one of the things that makes me I'm not so sure about that pick, is he needs ways to win the game. He's doing a pretty good job of taking good walls and having answers to what Blues is throwing at him. But right now he really lacks win conditions. Maybe he's going to go off-star, but that pretty much gets shut off by the Regice, and the Jolteon can outspeed you and kill you. So I don't know that that's a real solution. And then obviously Mence, right? DD Mence or something to that effect. But Regice can be EV to always survive the +1 Rock Slide or Brick Break or whatever. So you're going to need like multiple turns of setup. DD Mence would have a hard time getting through Weezing. DD Mence would have a hard time getting through Slowbro. So I don't know that Dastardly Dwarf has a meaningful win condition right now. And that to me is the biggest problem with his draft. He's picking the right things. Umbreon I could take or leave, but he's got a solid lineup. This is a good core 5, but at some point, whether it's a Spiker into a spinless opponent or random Ursaring or something in the back that he's going to try to get there with, he needs a win condition. JoeFish has the double pick. Going to go with Steelix and Venusaur, possibly both of whom have a defensive element in mind, since neither one is something that Lax wants to play against. As far as taking these in the specific matchup, the Steelix into the Raikou and the Aerodactyl, plenty good enough. I can get on board with the Steelix pick, and if he is going boom spam, what do you know? It is yet another potential boom user. And then the Venusaur, that is a fighting resist for Medicham, which might end up being important. It's good against Milo, it's good against Raikou. It makes plenty of sense in the matchup. I like both of these picks for JoeFish. Swing it back to the green team. We're going to have the Cow. And then two Firemons, Charizard and Arcanine, respectively. So it looks like Dastardly Dwarf is building full stall here. It's probably Bell Miltank and a bunch of fat over here. We've got one, maybe even two Wish users. Probably going to be Rest Registeel, Rest Yama, full bulk Starmie. It looks like we are going hard stall here for Dastardly Dwarf. He does pick up a third fighting weakness, which currently is not being punished, but take note of that in case Blues goes Machamp or Breloom or something to that effect. But the overall point stands. Dastardly Dwarf, hard stall is where we're going right now. And that is a bold move against a player as good as Blues. So I don't know if his teammates are dictating this draft for him or if he's doing it on his own, but that is an interesting approach that you are going to send Dastardly Dwarf in with full stall against Blues energy. You have got to have some damn confidence in your guy to make that kind of move. Steve is going to pick up Charizard here. That is reasonably threatening. Generally, ironically, Moltres and Zard are pretty good at countering each other, but, I mean, again, you can always mess with the set. Charizard can just have Rock Slide, and it can blow up the Moltres, so knowing that that's going to be on the other side, I can totally envision some weird Charizard sets. I could see Zard being like Fire Blast, Rock Slide, HP Electric, something to that effect, and cover most of the things here. We'll see how it ends up going, but I think the Zard, like the Dragonite, is a good mixed attacker and a good threat into what Kingu has going on. And then Arcanine is as simple as picking it into an opponent who just picked up 2 more fire weaknesses when he already had a Steelix, so Arcanine makes plenty of sense in the matchup. There are 3 fire weaknesses, granted if you want to count Lax, and then obviously Houndoom. There are 2 fire resistances, but I still think fire is a good attacking type. And also, I think Arcanine is an underrated answer to Gengar. If you build it specially bulky, max HP, high special bulk, whatever, it takes Thunderbolts and Ice Punches all day in a sandless game. You can't Will-O-Wisp it. It actually deals with Gengar pretty well all around. So I think that that's a good pick for sure from Salmon. And then finally, wrapping up this 3rd round for Blues and for Kingu, respectively, we're going to end up with Blaziken. That is addressing that fighting issue that I just mentioned. And also Regirock. So this is a funky pick into Dwarf. Like I said, he's got the Blaziken that's going to very much threaten all of the Registeel, the Umbreon, the Miltank. These other Mons can handle it to various extents, though of course they have to worry about, Thunder Punch for Starmie, HP Ice for Salamence, a couple of things that could be random against the Hariyama, but that's probably one of your safer bets. Not that it wants to come in on Sky Uppercuts or Focus Punches, but yeah, against a very passive team like the one that Dwarf has, Blaziken is exactly the kind of Mon that you want that can punish you, so scary pick there that, Dwarf has a couple things to address, but ultimately the biggest thing is he needs a way to win. But the Blaziken threat is very real, and I'm kind of surprised that Vaporeon is still floating out there, but feel like that should get picked somewhere in the 3rd round, but what do I know? And then Regirock in this middle matchup, yeah, you've got triple rock weakness in Zapdos, Dragonite, Charizard. Gotta grab that here. Big pickup, very late for Regirock as far as I'm concerned. That was a great pick for the matchup for Kingu, and it gives him a 3rd boom option if he also wants ways to move the game along. So we go to the 4th and final round of draft. We move over, as you know, to the green team and work our way left, and they're going to take 2 rapid spinners here. They're going to go with Blastoise and Armaldo, respectively. Starting with the Blastoise here. He's actually picking that into an opponent who does not currently have spikes, but that doesn't make it a bad pick. It's a precautionary measure, and Bulky Waters do seem reasonably good as a whole. Between the Metagross, the Gyarados, the Regirock, the Claydol, I don't think it's inconceivable at all that he ends up bringing both the Swampert and the Blastoise. There's a very real chance that gets played, and he's also cutting off spinner options from the other team. Currently, the player that affects the most is Blues, who doesn't have one, but then again, Dastardly Dwarf doesn't have a spiker, so who knows. Noting that both Cloyster and Glalie are still available to be drafted if people want to take those Mons. Armaldo picking up a spinner. In this case, it does matter because JoeFish has a spiker, and he's also picking Armaldo into Lax, which, as we know, can be used as a counter. So there's that. Going back over to the purple team now, they will do the following. Ludicolo for Blues, Alakazam, and Teach Me How to Dougie. Ludicolo, huh? Yeah, again, I think he's just trying to take advantage of the fact that Dastardly Dwarf has a passive team. So I think something with Subseed is just going to be super duper obnoxious. Does it kill most of this stuff? No, but it's also going to be really hard to get it killed. It's also going to be really hard to remove. And that's the fundamental issue. For as good as the walls are and for as high as the Mons quality is for Dastardly Dwarf, that is my single biggest issue. He needs ways to win. So he's going to be the next guy to pick, and we'll see what he takes. He's going to have the double pick, in fact, but he needs something to actually do damage and kill Blues, or he will probably eventually get grinded out. Alakazam in the middle matchup is a spicy pick. Probably the most special vulnerable person on the green team is Steve. Closest thing he's got to a special wall is Zapdos, so I think the Alakazam threat is very real, and he's only got one more pick to address that, so I don't know if we've got Hypno coming or Articuno coming or something, but he's going to need to pick up a special wall, or that Alakazam is going to give him a really hard time. Dugtrio for JoeFish. Yeah, I mean, Raikou on the other side. I mean, even if your opponent doesn't bring Raikou, because that would make it awkward, there's got to be other targets, but in this case, there is. We've got the Raikou, the Arcanine, the Medicham, the Celebi. That is enough targets to make Dugtrio justifiable. That pick is fine, and I think Boom Spam plus Dugtrio is just an archetype that makes sense. Currently, Salmon doesn't really have fantastic switches, maybe the Armaldo, into things that want to click Explosion. So Dugtrio makes sense in this matchup, no issue there. The Ludicolo I could take or leave because it doesn't really kill anything, but I think both the Alakazam and the Dugtrio may have very meaningful impacts in their matchups. So now Dastardly Dwarf, like I said, must address ways to win. Gotta find a way to win. So his double pick is going to be Cloyster and Tauros, which honestly, that's probably about as good as you're going to get. One thing that's really weird about that is he's going to pick 2 more fighting weaknesses. So he's actually, his last 5 picks are all going to be weak to fighting. So I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if Blues grabbed like Machamp or something and really tried to punish that. But that aside, these are the kinds of Pokemon that he needs. He's going to pick up a Spiker. Granted, the spinner doesn't really matter with Starmie. Maybe it frees up Starmie to do something else, but maybe you can argue that you take Glalie there rather than Cloyster since the spin part doesn't matter. That's a nitpick. Either way, he needs spikes and he grabs them. And then as far as the Tauros, there is only the one normal resist in Tara, which obviously is a little bit nervous about coming into EQ. Now, granted, Tauros in a sand game is a little awkward because you don't have lefties, so it does get chipped away. But he also has 2 Pokemon in Umbreon and Salamence that can learn Wish. He also has Spinner support. Hell, if he wants to run CB Rest Tauros, which is real funky, he does have the option to do that as well with Heal Bell. So maybe he can get some longevity out of the Tauros, and it seems like something of a threat, but I mean, there is Wheezing on the other side, which makes it a lot worse. So Tauros is probably the right concept. I don't know if it's the right application. I think I actually would have favored, like I said, something like Ursaring there maybe, because against the Wheezing, if you Will-O-Wisp or accidentally Sludge Bomb poison the Ursaring, now it starts coming at you with Facade, and that actually hits really, really hard. So I think I would have preferred a different aggressive way to try to do damage. Tauros is the right idea. I don't hate it. I think for me, Ursaring, like I said, comes to mind. There's probably something else that would do what I wanted to do a little bit better, but he at least has the right idea, and I think the Cloyster helps as well because Blues does not have a rapid spinner and has an almost entirely grounded team, the Wheezing being the exception. So Blues is going to have to grab Donphan or some bullshit here because there is no Ghost to protect those spikes for Dastardly Dwarf. Otherwise, Dwarf now actually has a real way to win, which is spikes plus stalling to the high heavens, which I think is currently the plan. Going back over to Purple, they are going to make the following picks. I had to double and triple read this one, but I guess it's a real pick. We've got Flygon. We've got Pikachu. Oh boy. And we've got Mystery Buffs. Fucking Pikachu, the mascot. Why don't we start with the Flygon pick? We've got multiple things here that it resists, such as electric, such as rock, such as fire. I could see why that would be good in the matchup, and I could see even maybe a choice band set, honestly, because nothing super safely switches into CB Flygon, especially if there are spikes down. So, like, if you've got a layer or 2 down and my Lota comes in and it's CB Earthquake or whatever, that can actually be really threatening. So I think the Flygon pick is good in the matchup. I think Joe, honestly, from a seat that I think is kind of narrow and difficult, I think Joe has had a pretty good draft. I think the Flygon pick is very relevant. I think the Houndoom won't come, and we'll figure out 6 out of the other 7. But yeah, I think that Houndoom pick, or the Flygon pick, is good. I'm never going to get on board with a Pikachu. Never going to endorse it. If he's not trolling, then I get why he's picking that. There are a bunch of electric weaknesses. There's Skarm, there's the Charizard, there's the Blastoise, there's a bunch of stuff that only takes Volt Tackle neutrally, the Dragonite, the Heracross, whatever. Pikachu blows, unviable, dies to Splash. I mean, the thing is, no bulk, no defensive utility. It's a gimmick. I think it's a meme. I think it's a troll. Supposedly he's picking it genuinely. I'm never going to endorse Pikachu. It's cute. It's finals. Maybe this will be a memorable moment. He's not going to bring the Pikachu. He shouldn't bring the Pikachu. It blows. That's all the discussion we're going to do about that Pokemon. And I'm surprised by this pick for Blues. Like I said, for me, that would have been a clear Donphan pick if I were Blues. Because he picks up a rapid spinner that he needs, and then it is also reasonable against Registeel, against Miltank, against Tauros, and against physical variants of Salamence. Hell, even to an extent against Yama as well. So I think not only would it have had merit in the matchup, and it would have added a rock resist for him, not that he really needs it. I guess to be fair, the Mence and the Yama might have rock attacks. But yeah, I think for me, I would have picked up Donphan there. I think that is a missed opportunity. I think not having a spinner is going to give Dwarf a window that I otherwise don't think he really had. I think I really favored the position of Blues in this matchup, but the Cloyster, I think, makes it much more winnable for Dwarf, and I think Blues could have easily just taken Donphan there and closed the door. I don't agree with the Mystery Vest pick, and that may come back to bite him. Finally, for Green, finishing up the draft in its entirety, they are going to wrap things up with Articuno and Dusclops, respectively. So, the Articuno, I think, is not fantastic given the matchup. It does wall the Gengar, which he very well might be worried about, so there's that. But it's not great into a lot of this other stuff. It doesn't beat Lax 1v1 unless you have HP Fire. The Fori can sit on it. Obviously, CB Flagon with Rock Slide, not a friend of Articuno. It's okay against some of the rest of the stuff. It's good against Venusaur. Obviously, you're not Arena Trapped by Dugtrio, but again, watch out for Rock Slide. Steelix you hit okay, but it can also hit you meaningfully. I don't think the Houndoom's coming, but the Houndoom would beat the Articuno. I neither love nor hate this pick, but if he really feels like he needs some more special padding, if he's really worried about the Gengar, that's fine. But I think the biggest threat right now for Salmon is the Spikes plus CB Flygon issue that I think might be very real. I think CB Flygon has a lot of merit in the matchup because as long as he's predicting correctly, Salmon really doesn't have a fantastic switch. Rock threatens a good number of these things. Obviously, Earthquake against a heavily grounded team. And the things that aren't grounded, Aerodactyl, Articuno, those things would get devastated by CB Rock Slide. And then obviously you can go HP Bug for Celebi as well. So I think CB Flygon is a real threat in that matchup. As far as the Dusclops, that is simply threatening to block Rapid Spin from Claydol. He may or may not actually bring that, but it gives him options in the builder. I think all 8 of the Pokemon for Steve are viable options, and we'll see how he chooses to configure it. And that is our draft. So go ahead right now before I tell you what I think. Let me know in the comments what you think. Who do you like in the A matchup, the B matchup, and the C matchup, respectively? Hit that like button, and yeah, like I said, let me know how you're feeling. Taking a look at it for myself. Interesting draft, and always a Mon or two that very surprisingly to me go undrafted. In this case, the really obvious one is Vaporeon. I thought for sure Vaporeon would get picked up somewhere, but alas, I guess nobody wanted it, but crazy to me that that guy goes undrafted. That's got to be wrong. Glalie as well, that one's a little bit more understandable, but I can't believe nobody picked up Vaporeon. That being said, let's see. Let's start with, of course, the A matchup. We've got JoeFish on Salmon. JoeFish, tragically, coming into this, is winless, so I guess we're supposed to consider that. I mean, Salmon isn't like, 5-1, 6-0, whatever, coming into this. He's having a middling tour. Salmon is an opponent that JoeFish can beat. but Salmon does have a few wins, whereas JoeFish has obviously been struggling. I don't think that matters as much as it needs to. Just using the eye test, I think JoeFish is doing fine and is cleaning up a mistake or two away from being a pretty decent player. So if we're just not too concerned about the player gap, the biggest of which is probably in the C matchup, which we'll talk about after, let's just look at the teams. Like I said before, I think the CB Flygon threat is very real. He's not dead in the water to it. It's a sandless game. My Lotic can probably mostly handle it as long as he can keep spikes from being down. But that's a pretty big asterisk. It's going to force Armaldo, whether he was planning on doing it before. Salmon is going to have to bring the Armaldo, and the Armaldo is going to have to carry Rapid Spin. He's not a great Rapid Spinner. He's usually better off doing other things, but it's going to be absolutely necessary in this matchup that the Armaldo comes and that the Armaldo does have Rapid Spin. So there's that. That's kind of a forced team building element. It would actually be interesting to me because I think the Houndoom is not coming for JoeFish. It would actually be interesting to me if he also cut the Dugtrio. I wonder if Salmon tries to cut one or two of the theoretically Dugtrio weak mons and then tries to shore up his team against that. But I wonder if the counterplay is you just don't bring the Dugtrio. It's interesting. Another option is, and I don't like this option, but Joe could just not bring the Fortress. So if Salmon loads up, if he goes HP Fire Celebi, brings the Arcanine, HP Fire Articuno, whatever, forces stupid Rapid Spin on Armaldo, what if you just don't bring the Fortress? That's an interesting option as well. But as it sits, when I assume that he is going to bring the Fortress, like I said, I think CB Flygon is a good threat. As far as dealing with the lax, I think Salmon, didn't go like off the wall with it, but probably did enough. The Celebi itself is obviously a good counter. It's always weird initially to pick lax into Celebi, and then you've got Metacham and Armaldo, which can theoretically handle it. That other stuff isn't that great. Lax is not terrible in this matchup, but JoeFish has a couple specific different ways that he can build his team. He can go more aggressive, more boom spammy. He can go like spikes, boom spam with Dugtrio and CB Flygon, which, honestly might just be the answer. Or he could try to grind it out a little bit more. Go a little more defensive with 4E, have it not have boom, have the lax be a rest lax, have the Venusaur force switches with spikes, a little bit more of a controlling matchup. Cut the Houndoom and somebody else and go a little bit more on the defensive side, something a little closer to an OU 4E stall. As far as Salmon's end, the Aerodactyl into a player who does not have a bulky water is obviously a very real threat. He picked up the Steelix, but obviously he could just click EQ. And Flygon is not really an arrow counter. Yes, it does resist Rock Slide, but got to worry about HP Flying, Double Edge, whatever. Don't really feel safe switching Flygon, especially CB Flygon, but really any Flygon into the Aerodactyl. So I think the Aerodactyl is going to be one of the biggest advantages for Salmon. The Raikou between the Snorlax, the Steelix, the Venusaur, the Dugtrio, the Flygon. Honestly, I don't even think I would bring the Raikou. That's probably literally my first cut if I'm Salmon. The Metacham has got to come, no doubt about it. And then the rest of the stuff pretty much is just a role player. The Celebi is reasonable in the matchup. There is Dugtrio on the other side. There are Boom users. There is Houndoom maybe on the other side. I would never cut Celebi. It's uncuttable, but probably Celebi is not as good in this matchup as it would normally be. But the Raikou legit would be my first cut if I'm Salmon, and then I'd figure it out from there. So yeah, I don't know exactly what the matchup looks like. I think the Houndoom doesn't come, and I think the Raikou doesn't come, but other than that, I think the options are on the table. Not sure here. Not sure. If the players were exactly equal and they were both super duper high level, I think I would rather have the Pokemon that JoeFish has, but considering where we are, oh man. Alright, bold move here. I'm going to predict JoeFish. I'm going to predict a winless man to get his first win of the tournament in the finals when it matters most, and he would be a hero to his team if he manages to do that. Everybody likes a good underdog story, right? I'm going to pick JoeFish in that matchup. Moving over to the B seat, Kingu against Steve. Back and forth for sure. Up to picks 5 or 6 or so, I definitely like Steve's end of that matchup. I thought that Kingu's team was probably too passive. I thought that the Gyarados pick into Skarmory, Zapdos, Swampert was very questionable, but you've got to do what you've got to do against the Heracross. And then the Alakazam happened, and that really changed things. Alakazam as a whole is overrated, but it's a legit threat into Steve's squad. I really, really, really would have preferred for him to pick up Articuno, Hypno, something for the Alakazam. But as it stands, that thing is a very, very real threat. It's going to completely change the way that he needs to team build. He's going to have to give things weird EVs in special defense just to make sure they can always tank a +1 Psychic from Zam and then retaliate and kill it back. That's going to make the builder weird for sure. That's also going to make it more difficult to bring things like Charizard or whatever that do not set up well on the Zam and do not beat the Zam 1v1. So I guess we'll see, but I definitely thought that Steve had the advantage in that matchup until the Alakazam came down. Now I'm not so sure. At the same time, the Heracross is still a very real threat on the other side. The Gyarados helps, but the Gyarados is terrible in the matchup, and you're bringing it just for Heracross. And there's not really a lot of good answers otherwise. I mean, Regirock, but like even then, what if the Heracross just subs when you come in? What if it clicks Focus Punch? Like, I think Heracross being sub, Focus Punch, Megahorn, Rock Slide, for example, threatens everything on the other side, and that is a set that I don't think Kingu has a good answer for whatsoever, Gyarados or not. So that threat I think is very real. And then Pikachu's a cutie, but like, come on now. I don't buy it, and maybe he'll watch this and just to spite me he'll bring it anyway, but that Mon isn't good, that Mon isn't viable, and I just don't see him bringing it. Or if he does bring it, I don't see that being a wise and impactful decision. But what do I know? All things considered, I think that ultimately, other than the Alakazam, I think that Kingu has the same issue that I'm about to harp on Dwarf on, and that he has a difficult time winning. The Moltres is a reasonable threat, but I think the Zapdos comes, the Blastoise comes, and even if it does bring HP Grass for Swampert, I think he should have enough in totality to neutralize it, but maybe I'm undervaluing how good the Moltres is in the matchup. Steve is a little bit shaky against it, and again, he might be forced to run some weird sets. He might have to bring the Swampert and the Knight because it can't have both HP Grass and HP Ice, and then he might have to put Heal Bell on the Dragonite because whichever one doesn't get hidden powered very well might get Will-O-Wisped, etc. This is ultimately a pretty offensive battle. It's going to be a blow-for-blow situation. The Blissey is not incredible in the matchup because I think all of Swampert, Heracross, Dragonite, Charizard, maybe even Blastoise. I think there's going to be a lot of focus punches on the other side to make Blissey not as good. I don't have a clear winner in this one. I can go either way, but with some hesitation, just because I'm salty about the stupid fucking Pikachu, I'm going to pick Steve to take this one down. And then finally in the C-Seat, Blues against Dastardly Dwarf. I definitely think that Blues screwed this up by not taking Donphan. I definitely think that if he had taken Donphan over Misdreavus, I would pick Blues, period. Case closed, nothing to talk about here. I think he gave his opponent a window of opportunity that he should not have by letting that Cloyster go unchecked. Now, granted, he does pick another Levitator if he plans on actually playing the Misdreavus, but still, the best case scenario is that 4 of his 6 Pokemon, if he brings both the Weezing and the Misdreavus, are grounded, which is still a lot and which is still vulnerable. It plays right into what Dastardly Dwarf wants to do, because his whole team is designed to just sit there and stall. He's going to try to get spikes down, and then he's going to try to cling on to dear life as he grinds them out. That being said, if his only real, true, proper win condition is spikes, which seems to be the case, Salamence counts as like half, but it's going to have resistance on the other side for sure, between a T-Tar that's going to have moves to hose it, the Regice is going to be EV to always survive at +1, a Jolteon that will almost certainly have T-Wave or HP Ice or both, a Weezing, and a Slowbro. The Mence, while it is always a dangerous Mon, is not going to have an easy time going in for a sweep. So it's just kind of Cloyster, and I think that was a good pick, and I think Blues really botched the response, but I don't know that it's enough. Ultimately, I think that Dastardly Dwarf's team is too passive, and ultimately, I think Blues is a superior player to Dastardly Dwarf by enough of an amount to where I factor it in to the matchup. So I'm gonna pick Blues, but I still want to give him a scolding and a spanking for not taking Donphan in that last pick that I strongly feel he should have grabbed. But I am nevertheless going to predict Blues to win. So, the C matchup is the one that I feel the most strongly about. The A and the B matchup I can totally see going either way. You could flip-flop those or whatever you want to do. But according to my official predictions, I've got the purple team 2-1 over the green team in this draft. Let me know in the comments what you think. Always happy to hear your thoughts. Off to work I go. Appreciate you guys watching. I will see you in the next video. We've got one more team draft, then we'll get to the matches.